Hello, and welcome to Building Influence. My name is Rowena Moraes. We have another episode of season 1, which is a deep dive into education. It's a collection of 10 stimulating interviews with creators, leaders, and SME entrepreneurs from around the world who have achieved considerable success in their area of expertise. These interviews bring together the best strategies, tools, and tips that they have found to be most effective in building influence and achieving the goals that drive them. This show is for anyone busy crafting and creating to realize their vision. It is designed for people striving to come up with products, services, and teams. We never stop learning. We learn by doing, experimenting, and risk taking. And we learn from the missteps and failures of others. So, this is the place for you to discover new ideas that will keep you motivated and strengthened by what you're working to achieve. Building influence is unique in that it looks primarily at how individuals as creators, leaders, and business owners have had a significant impact by what they did and how they went about doing it. So the show examines 3 aspects of influence: their profile, their network, and their body of work. And the focus on the small to mid-sized business segment reminds us that anyone can transform their dreams into reality. Although we offer no silver bullets, the lessons drawn from the experience of these guests can help you avoid years of wasted effort and frustration. And the bite sized learning enables us to start implementing these ideas immediately. My guest today is Mike Yates. Mike is reinventing education with the Reinvention Lab at Teach for America. He's a 2-time TEDx speaker and host of the Schoolish podcast. So good to have you with us today, Mike. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. Let's talk a little bit about your profile. So tell us about your career journey. How much of it was deliberate? How much of it involved moving with the flow? And are you currently where you intended to be?
I love that question because I looked at it. I was like, oh, my answer is yes. It is a little bit all of it. I did not intend on being in education. As a matter of fact, when I grew up, my mom told me, she's like, Michael, never be a teacher, never go into
Oh,
education
really?
because it doesn't pay well enough. And it's just, she's like, it's not a good career. Well, I ended up doing it anyway. I grew up hating school, and I went into the school system to try to fix the system from inside of the belly of the beast. And I became sick of it. And so I made a very calculated move. So I made a move to leave the system. But what I did not anticipate is where I would end up next. And that was at a place called Alpha, where we essentially built a software company and a school at the same time. And I got to work with some of the most incredible people I've ever worked with. And that changed the trajectory of my career. I thought I was going to a different place. And then I realized I had to go to another one. While I was at Alpha, I wanted to do what I was doing there on a bigger stage to influence and impact more people. So I am on a journey, and I have made a calculated move, which is why I ended up at Teach for America, which in the United States is one of the largest preparers of teachers in the history of our country. So I am not at the last stop yet, but I'm on the right track. I'm on the way.
Certainly. I can sense a lot of energy coming through on this call. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what we're going to discuss. What do you want viewers to know about you from a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I think I want people to know that I'm a creative. That is a part of myself that for the last 4 years, if you met me within the last 4 years, you might not know that. But like, I write poems, and I dabble in graphic design, and I do video editing, and I sing, I record music, right? I have all these things about myself that I just have not been using because I've been busy building my career and busy literally physically building schools. And so I am committed to, for the rest of my life, taking these elements of creativity and infusing them in the work that I get to do every day in education. So what that looks like is, like, at the Reinvention Lab, like, I'm the video guy, I'm the graphic design guy. Even though it's not my job description, I do those things when I can. I'm going to find some way to hold a poetry slam. I don't know how, but I'm going to find some way to hold a poetry slam. I took my love of sneakers and design, and I combined them with a partnership that we're running right now with the sneaker brand. We had education organizations
Oh,
design sneakers that tell the story of the future of learning. And they come out in October, so people will be able to buy them.
wow, that is exciting.
Yeah.
I get a sense of flow here. You've got these areas that you're very passionate about, you're very driven by purpose, and then you've got all these other creative elements that you can bring to bear, and you kind of doing that already. So I'm
Yeah.
already sensing a lot of flow. Am I right?
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You're so right.
Um, can you share one tactic that has enhanced the visibility of your professional skills and expertise?
Yeah, I think it's video. So I really think it's multiple modes of communication,
Hmm.
and figuring out how to repurpose them. So learning to write an article and turn it into a video and turn it into a tweet and turn it into a graphic. Same thing with like a podcast. Like I have a podcast, so learning how to take my podcast and turn that into writing. And the way that that's increased my visibility is because I realized, like many teachers, years ago, that I was creating things that I thought were brilliant, and I didn't know until students and parents and other like colleagues started to tell me, like, I've never seen anything like this. And so I thought, well, I want to share that with the world, not so people can say, oh, look at that guy, he's brilliant, but so that they can learn, and so they can say, you know what, I'm going to take a version of that and do it in my classroom. So that those things contributed to the visibility of that mission. So yeah, I repurposing content.
Excellent. So what has been key for you then in building your digital presence, in building your online profile?
I think for me, it's been on authenticity and like not taking the shortcuts.
Hmm.
Um, Believe it or not, there are a lot of people online that are literally buying followers.
Are
There
they?
are websites
I
that
hear
I
about
found that
that.
there's, yeah, I mean, like there's a website called appsally.com where you can buy a follower like you buy stuff on Amazon. It's crazy. It's nuts. This is a whole stream of income for people. This whole world, right? I don't. I see no value in that. And so I think authenticity for me, and just consistency, like never backing off of the messages that I believe,
Hmm.
while at the same time being open enough to change my mind when the evidence presents itself that I should change my mind. So if I encounter someone online that I have a discussion with, and they convince me that I am completely wrong, then I'm like, man, that's a huge moment for me, because now I have a whole stream of learning to do. Like this whole like I've got YouTube rabbit holes to go down and TikTok rabbit holes to learn about this new thing. So I really want to learn out loud and learn in public, and I want to be my authentic self online, which I know is something that a lot of people say. But I am like I'm very close to a few influencers who are just straight up lying about who they are and what they do, and I just don't want to be that. Like that's not why I'm
Say again.
online. I'm not trying to
What
be
do you mean?
famous.
Sorry, just clarify that last point. You're very close to a couple of influencers who.
Oh, I have friends that are influencers that they just lie. They don't tell the truth about, like,
Okay.
like one in particular. I have a friend who has hundreds of thousands of followers on LinkedIn, and if you look at the post of that person, there will be like 2 likes, one comment out of hundreds of thousands of followers. That means that there's not very much substance, and I don't want to be that. I love that person and I love the work that they do, but that is a part of them that I am actively encouraging them to change, because I think that whether you have 10 followers, 10,000, or 10 million, it should be you.
Yeah. Well, not everyone necessarily finds that easy to do. And that's the other
Right.
thing about online is that there's a kind of footprint. And so
Hmm.
even if you have a great number of followers, but your posts are not resonating, that is also going to be telling things to people. So
Right.
there's a kind of transparency, in the profile and in the activities and in the network to some extent that
Yep.
people, even if they can't see the full picture, they're going to be thinking twice. Something's not making sense,
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good that you mentioned that. So can you share 2 or 3 ways in which you put yourself out there, how you market yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the ways that I think is related to the last point is I used to be, when I started my journey with personal branding, I used to be so afraid that I would post something, and no one would like it. And then I realized, well, it's not really about that. It's not about casting a wide net. It's not about getting a lot of people. It's about casting the right net.
Mhm.
And so what I found is that my niche online, I talk about dismantling the education system. I basically tell people that everything they know is wrong about education and learning. And so there are things that I've come to expect. I come to expect pushback. I come to expect to grow slow, at a more deliberate rate. And I've come to understand that every single person who chooses to hit the follow button, like, they can be part of my community. I'm actually uncomfortable with the concept of follower, right? Like, nobody should be following me. We're doing this together, right? Like, we're learning this together. So I
Love
think I
that.
think that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to post. Like, you have brilliance, and people say, "Oh, like, what if it's been said before?" Everything's been said before. My
Yeah.
good friend Morgan, who I work with, she always says that. She says, "I don't care what people feel about politics. If I've learned anything from Donald Trump, it's that if you say the same thing enough times, people will believe it." And I was like, that's a good point. It's the way it works online. It doesn't matter if today I say the best color is red, and then you post the best color is red. There's a whole different audience of people who may engage with that content in a different space and different time. So it doesn't matter about. So I wouldn't worry about that. I say just post. And the second thing that I do is I don't post what I think will do well. I post what I like. I post what I want to know. I I I just found out that, like, for example, on LinkedIn, polls are people are using them to get visibility. And I've been using polls since the feature came out just because I thought it was cool. Because the way that I ask thought-provoking questions, I do that in my real life. I do it with my kids, with my wife, and they hate it. I do it with my job. Like, anybody that works with me will tell you, like, that dude he will stop a meeting and ask a question, right? And so, like, this is who I am. And when I saw, oh, there's a poll feature where I get to talk and debate with people, like, oh, I love that. It gets me going. So I'm not doing it for, like, because the numbers are big. I'm doing it because I know that Dr. Michael Barnes is going to show up and challenge me on there, right? And I love going back and forth with him because he knows more about education than me. So I love that. I know that Everett Hill is going to show up there, right? Like, he's going to show up and comment, right? Like, there are people by name who I know. Like, when I post this, I'm going to hear from them.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's not about, like, what's going to do well. It's about what do you want to get out of this, right? Like, so that's
Yeah.
how I approach it.
Yeah. Okay. So say someone, pretty much at the start of this kind of journey, really hesitant and uncertain what to expect, what to do. What would you advise?
I think there's two things that I would say. The first thing is, I actually think people should go when they're ready to go. They should do it when they're ready to do it. Don't put
Mhm.
it off. Do it when you're ready to do it. My recommendation for people is always start yesterday, right? Like, start as soon as possible.
Do it when you're ready
You
to do
know,
it, but start yesterday.
right? I know.
How about that?
It's
No,
a,
but I get what you're
it's a
saying.
paradox.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
what you're saying. You need to be comfortable with it. You need to
Yeah.
wrap it around in your mind and know what your plan is. Because until you do
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you're kind of ding donging and you're just following the crowd, whatever everyone's doing. So it makes
Hmm.
sense. Do it when you're ready, but then as soon as you do, start. Just
Yeah.
begin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
The other,
yeah, sorry, carry on.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sure. Oh, I was just saying, the other thing I would say is just to find voices who you like. You don't have to DM them and, like, get on Zoom with them. You can learn from people just by, like you said, just by, like, if you're following the right people. Like, for example, there was a guy who I engaged with on LinkedIn for about a year and a half before we had our first conversation. And our first conversation was about being on the same television show, right? Like, we were like, oh, this is cool. And neither of us ended up doing that show. And now we're
Oh,
actually working together on a project. But
okay.
I told him, I was like, look, man, like, there's a lot of stuff that I learned about LinkedIn just by watching what you did, right? Like, I never called him. I never messaged him and said, hey, like, how do you do this? I just watched what he did. And I listened to the things that he said that were working. And I was like, I guess I'll try that. And if it works for me, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yep. a kind of remote mentorship. I mean, a previous guest also
Exactly.
talked about that. You don't necessarily need to have that such a personalized relationship. You just from
Right.
afar, we can tap into that, follow what you're saying, read up everything you can. That's so powerful because you get
Mhm.
complete choice about who that person is. So,
Right.
yeah, fantastic. So let's now talk a little bit about your network. Okay. What are 2 or 3 key aspects of networking that you think are important? And bear in mind,
Um,
people who are completely new to networking. So what would you be able to share?
yeah, I yeah, I think for someone that's completely new to networking, I think one of the most important things is curiosity. It's really being curious about the other person that you're trying to meet. And the reason why I say curiosity is because sometimes networking can feel self-serving.
Hmm.
You can feel like, oh, I'm just doing this because like I need to get ahead or I need to get a new job or whatever it might be. But really be curious about that other person and what they know and how they got there. And if you can show a person that you were interested in them, they'll tell you everything. They'll give you anything you want to know. So I think curiosity is one, and then number two, I would also say is consistency. I see people hop on a LinkedIn and they go hard for 3 weeks, or they go hard for 2 months. When the world was open, I'd see a person at a networking event, and they'd say, "Oh, this is my first one." And I'd say, "Oh, are you coming to the one next month?" And they'd say, "Oh, yeah, yeah," and then I'd never see them again. So I think consistency is another thing. You have to, yeah, you got to put yourself out there, and people have to see your face in multiple places and spaces before you start like really, entrenching yourself in that work.
So, like for you personally, how much time do you spend on? So, is it just LinkedIn? There's a couple of other platforms.
I use LinkedIn as my main platform. I spend about 80% of my time on social media there. I post on LinkedIn 2 to 3 times per day, and I engage
Oh,
quite a
okay.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2 to 3 times a day.
Um,
Wow,
yep, per day.
that's awesome.
I'm like a
And
yeah
so, what? 5 day week, 7 day week?
6. I actually normally don't do anything on Sundays. I
Yep.
normally just I the Saturday I may post once, sometimes I don't, but it's normally 5 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
The weekends are for my family.
Of course.
But yeah, I am on there. I used to use it a lot differently. I used to spend 2 hours per day. I'd take an hour at 10 a.m. and then an hour at 2 p.m. where I didn't post anything. I just went on other people's content and I just read and engaged. The platform has seemed to change a little bit where there's not it's just there's a lot more content, but there's not more valuable content necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, but I'm also dabbling in Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on TikTok, not really creating content on TikTok. I'm just consuming a bunch of content on TikTok to learn. Just like I, I'm making a larger argument about TikTok later on for my day job, that TikTok is a search engine and not necessarily a social media website. Very similar to YouTube, but my main places are Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay. So, share 2 things that you've been doing that has helped you grow your network.
Yeah. What the first thing that I've done that's helped me grow my network and sort of like actually get job opportunities, like job offers,
Mm-hmm.
has been that I am focused on adding disproportionate value to the other person
Okay.
with no expectation of help or value in return. My first question when I meet a new person is often, what do you need? Like, what do you need that I can give you, that I can help you with? I'm also convinced that, especially with the people that consume my content, I'm convinced that I want to give everything away that I know for free. I don't want to create a course. There's nothing wrong with creating courses. And in a lot of cases, there's a lot of great courses out there, and there's a lot of good money to be made. But I personally, for educators, I don't want to create another paid course. I don't want to create another barrier. I want my content to be free. And the reason why is because when I was an educator and I didn't have very much money, Gary Vaynerchuk's podcast was free. And I could listen to Gary Vee audio experience all day. And I could watch his YouTube. And he would literally say, I'm giving this information for free. I'm giving you the cheat code. And 90% of you are not going to do anything about it. And I would say, well, I don't want to be in that 90%. I'm gonna be that 10%. And so I think it's adding disproportionate value to that other person. My best friend and I, we have this competition that's been running for 10 years about who can give the best gift and the best compliments to the other person's family. We've been doing this for 10 years now. And
Wow.
I'm currently winning. Yeah, I'm winning. Uh,
That
so
is a
yeah, it's just
unique
like,
challenge,
yeah, like
but a positive one.
yeah, like we haven't lived in the same city for a long time. And so we have just been trying to find ways to stay connected. And this is one of the most powerful ways that we know, because it trains us for like what we do on the job as well.
Okay, so let's talk about the network now, your existing network. Okay, key criteria for your network. How are you making decisions about who to connect with?
Yeah, right now I want anyone who's innovating in the education space, and that doesn't mean that I don't connect with people who are traditional educators. I do. My audience focuses on two categories, and these are one is your bleeding edgers. These are the people that in the education community, where like people are like, what are these ideas? These ideas are crazy. Is that audience? And the second one is traditional educators that feel stuck. I am building a personal branding community to help educators who feel stuck take control of their career and move to the next place for the next school.
Where are you building this personal branding community?
On LinkedIn, I've got a LinkedIn group, and then I do LinkedIn Live every Friday, where the strategy that I am currently using to build my brand and get job offers from Facebook and Teach for America and like all these places, I am just putting it online for free.
What's the response been like so far?
Oh, am I frozen for you?
Yes, a little bit, but I think it will. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about the second part of my community being educators who feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help them get unstuck by giving them free content. So I do a LinkedIn
Okay.
Live every Friday, and then I have a personal branding group that's specifically for them on LinkedIn.
That's a lot of stuff going on top of
Yeah,
work. How do you manage all
right.
of that?
Fortunately, my job at work is network building. So I work
Okay.
for something called the Reinvention Lab, and because I had this personal brand, they recruited me to come build networks with them. So it's kind of like I run experiments in my personal branding networks
Yep.
that I actually run at work as well.
So in terms of, so we know who you're looking for in terms of your network. Do you get lots of people just wanting to connect as well outside of your?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There are, and I will connect with most people.
Mhm.
Um, but if I get a connection request from somebody that's not active on the platform,
Yeah.
I just don't connect with them because
Okay.
I want an active network. I don't want like to me it means more to have 100 active followers than 10,000 stagnant.
Yeah.
So if I check their profile, I literally every time I get a connection request, I go to their profile and I look at their post and their activity, and I see the last time they posted. And if it's like a month ago, then I'm like, I don't really. I'll just leave it because I want people that are engaged, and I want to have conversations, and I want to grow together, and I want to learn.
So you talked about the kind of people that you want to have on your network. What are some of the processes or steps that you take to, the practicality of broadening the network? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm just really clear about my messaging.
Mm-hmm.
I I like I used to do this thing on LinkedIn and on all social where I'd like mix in like general inspirational content with my very specific niche content. And I realized like I don't care. It's not that I don't care about the motivation. I don't want to do that because that was attracting people who I didn't care to have conversations with. Or it was attracting people to me for the wrong reason. Like, I'm not a motivational speaker. That's just not what I do. And so now everything that I post is about education reinvention, education reform. And it is like, it's the number one thing people say to me is they're like, you're so consistent, right? Because that's just what I do. That's what I post online
Singular
because it's what I
focus.
care about. Yeah. And
So,
I don't have buckets. Yeah. It's just one thing.
okay, so that makes it very clear too for people who are coming to the profile. How about, so a lot of the growth in the network is related to the post, but the actual outreach, can you talk a bit about that?
Oh yeah. So I don't only reach out to, well, now when I'm reaching out, I actually go outside of education because my belief is that the educators have to learn from. We have to glean strategies from people who are not in education. Tech is also a part of my community. I worked in tech, and so like tech entrepreneurs, like I'm fascinated with video game designers, right? Like I think that if you want to build a great school, hire a video game designer and let that person tell you how to keep students interested during the day, because they do that better than anybody else. I mean, anybody on the planet. So there are occupations that I am convinced are a piece of the puzzle and that I want to learn from. And so I go after those people. Like I Will Wright, who's the guy who created The Sims. I reached out to him and was like, can we meet? Like, can we talk? This is what I'm trying to do. People like that. There are people that, I mean, obviously that work in tech, engineering. One of the best connections I made is a guy named Markel Baldwin, who worked at Tesla, and was interested. He himself was interested in going into more of like this educational speaking, and but he was an engineer. He was a staff engineer at Tesla, and we just had the most fascinating conversations where I learned things from him that I decided to use and build into school models that I worked on. So I reach out to people outside of the field that I know I can learn from.
That sounds very enriching as well.
Yeah, it's great.
What are some of the consistent elements in your outreach effort?
Oh,
Think
it's
practical
almost
steps.
always,
Yeah.
it's almost always a personal message, a personal DM. And one of the things that I do is before, so the steps I would take, like if I were talking to somebody new at this that I am, so the first thing is I only reach out when I have a real interest in meeting or talking to that person. And because of that, I really follow through with that interest. If they have a podcast, I go listen to the podcast. I like immerse myself. And then before I actually send a connection request, I engage with their content. Like I show up in their feed, and I do it depending on the person. I do it for months because I'm showing, it's a gesture.
Months
of me
before
showing them,
you connect. Months before you connect. Okay.
Depending on who they are. So I want to show them like I'm truly interested in like I'm not connecting with you for what you can do for me. Like I'm truly interested in, and when I make the connection request, the message is always literally like, I love your podcast, or I love this project that you're working on. Like, how can I be a part of helping you? I try not to, I try never to connect with somebody because I want something from them. That always feels bad for me. And I hate when people do it to me. I hate when someone connects with me and they're like, oh, I want to sell you this product. Hey, I don't like that. So I try never to do that to people. And so they'll see me pop up in their feed. And they're like, well, who's this guy? Most of the time, they will connect with me before I send the connection request.
I was going to ask. Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great strategy. And, it also shows them consistency. It shows them a better sense of who you are. So that's going to get you the results that you want. So
yeah, got to play the long game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so now we know about your profile, we know about your network. Let's get into your body of work. What do you consider to be your unique strengths, your areas of professional expertise?
In terms of expertise, I used to believe that like I didn't have like, I was like, nobody's an expert, but I accept that people have expertise, and I do believe that I believe that I'm an expert communicator. And the reason why is because I just have more reps than most people. I started doing competitive speech and debate when I was in grade 10. So I was about 16 years old, and I started competing with people from all over the world. And what it did for me, like I had a lot of success in the activity. I went on to do it in college. And what I've
Did you
learned that it is done.
did you just happen to get into it, or you kind of knew that this was something you were interested in and good at? Like how did that come about in
I
your
got
10?
roped in.
Ah, okay.
I totally got roped in. I was trying to be. I wanted to go to the national basketball. I wanted to play basketball, and I had a teacher in high school who was like, "Look, just come do debate." I said, "This is for nerds. I don't want to do debate." And he said, "No, you should just try it." And so I tried it out, and I ended up loving it. I
Okay.
loved it, and so I stayed in it from high school and college, and so it made me a true expert. Like I have so many more reps, like so many more chances to do public speaking than most people, that I like. I don't fear it anymore. There's no situation that I feel like that I haven't been in, and so I do consider myself an expert in public speaking. I consider myself an expert in school, like in education. I was a student my whole life, and then I became a teacher. I've literally been in school my whole life. I've never left school. And so I think I'm an expert in school.
Ah.
And it's all just for like time and reps. That's really it.
Okay. So let's delve a little bit deeper into your strengths. Okay. I know you've told us a little bit about that initial start in debating and public speaking. When you first started, was there any fear? There was. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Fear of public speaking.
Mm. I mean, pretty
Um,
much one of the biggest fears in the world. Everyone's
yeah, people
facing
say
that. So love to know
they say it's
more.
number one.
Mm.
I'm fortunate that I didn't have that. I
Okay.
feared losing. I didn't want to lose. Um, I didn't. I was born with this gift of gab.
Wow.
Like I didn't. I would talk to anyone as a child, right? Like, and this is why my speech coach, who would end up, he's my favorite teacher ever. This is why he identified me as someone, because he was like, I've seen you sort of bounce around and talk. And then on the first day of class, he's like, hey, everyone get up and present like who you are and where you're from. And I like the speech I gave, I was like, I'm from this tiny city on the outskirts of Galveston called Houston, Texas. And it's a funny joke because Houston's a massive city, right? And so I just gave what I thought was, I was just winging a speach, and he
Hmm.
was like, "That was really good, and you just made that up on the spot." I was like, "Yeah, like, whatever." So
Okay.
I just always had this sort of thing. I enjoyed playing with words. I wrote poetry at a very young age, So to me, it was just like what I did. I remember being afraid at one time. I was at a national tournament at the University of Las Vegas in Las Vegas, Nevada, US. And the final round was in their basketball arena, which was like 20,000 seats. And that was an audience at that time at 17. I had never sene an audience that big.
So there were
And
20,000 people
yeah, well, I don't know. There were not
or
20,000. There
close.
was, but yeah, there were, I don't, I would say there was probably about 5,000, but it felt like it was full.
Still
You know,
feels like a lot.
right. Yeah, it felt like it was full. You're on this little stage, and the whole, like, as far as you can see, there's seats filled.
Mm.
And nobody like keeps track of attendance, so you don't know, but they tell you like this is a 20,000 person arena. And I just remember hearing, like, before I started, when they, people, there was this loud applause, and most people that would make them feel comfortable, but that at that moment I was like, this is crazy, this is making me nervous. But it all went away when I started speaking. And that was where I learned, that was the most important lesson I learned in public speaking. It's like, whatever nerves you feel, as soon as you open your mouth, they'll go away. Like, and so I do remember feeling nervous that day.
Oh, okay. Okay. What have you done to build on these strengths? I know there might be some overlaps with these questions because you've
Mhm.
talked about um, finding ways to keep doing the public speaking, but are there any other things that you've done to build on these strengths?
Yeah, I learned to identify things as like public speaking that people don't, right? Like I was actually trying to teach students to do public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of like making them get up and write speeches, I was like, hey guys, we're gonna learn magic. We're gonna perform magic tricks. And I've realized that some of the best communicators on earth get no credit for their communication ability. Magicians are some of the best communicators on planet Earth. Even a guy like David Blaine, who does his act is sort of like he downplays himself and he's very sort of subdued when he does magic. And as a matter of fact, he even presents himself as being very nervous, but he's not. He's in control the entire time. And when you show a 9-year-old or a 14-year-old a great magician, you literally watch them physically lean in as the magic trick is happening, because the magician has the audience's attention. And outside of magicians, another thing that I did was I watch a lot of stand-up comedy. Dave Chappelle, I believe, is the greatest stand-up comedian ever. And he is the greatest stand-up comedian ever because he's the best storyteller of any stand-up comedian I've ever seen. And so I realized that there are these other professions that have elements of things that I need to learn so that I can go from being really good to being great. And that's basically what I do that every day, honestly. Like great pastors who lead great churches, right? Like they have public speaking ability. And then, the other thing is I sit and listen to old people tell stories a lot. Because, well, the cool thing about elders, especially like in the United States, Black culture, like that's how we preserve our history is through storytelling, like many cultures around the world.
Yeah.
If you sit and listen to an old Black person tell stories in the United States, you can tell that they've told this story so many times that there are parts that you don't even know if they're true, but they're so exciting
Yeah.
because they figured out ways to like get you into the story when it's just you and them. And it's always very inspiring for me.
Where are you meeting these older people?
Well, they're like my family, or like when I was growing up, there was a park that I used to play basketball in called Amity Park. And there would always be these old guys that were hanging out at the park. And I would just go be like, why are you
Just walk
here
up to a
for?
random person and say hi.
Yeah, and just talk to them. Yeah.
And they're friendly,
Like,
aren't they?
yeah, I live in Texas as well. So Texas is like one of the most friendly places ever. You like Texas, you might meet somebody and they might invite you over for dinner the first time you meet them. Like
Wow.
it's in some places here it's pretty friendly, but unfortunately I met a lot of those people. But yeah, it's they're mostly people from my neighborhood, family,
Yep.
friends of family, and just not only the wisdom, but the artistry and the way that they choose to tell their story is always beautiful. If you like find an old person from Brooklyn, New York, you find like an old person from Brooklyn on YouTube, like the best story ever.
Oh, good. Good. I have to go and check it out then.
Yeah.
But yeah, some really great ideas here.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about stumbling blocks. Can you share any stories, hardships, failures, missteps along the
I
way?
think I think one of the things that I identify as a failure of mine in my career, so in education, I once left a school that I left too early. I left for more money elsewhere. And generally speaking, I encourage people to go make as much money as you possibly can, because like you can't take it with you when you die. But if you have the ability to ethically make as much money as possible, you should do that. But in this case, I left in a really great school environment for more money. And it was immediately the wrong decision. And that's where the most important lesson I learned from that is that the culture that you enter is more important than the paycheck, right? Like,
Yep.
because you can get a great paycheck and be miserable and be making half
You
of
could
that.
sense that immediately that you were in the wrong place.
Yep. almost immediate. I mean, within the first couple of weeks, I had this thought like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong choice. And I remember telling my wife, it's like, I think I'm at the wrong place. Like, it's not going to affect you, but like, it's going to affect me every day. Like, I'm in the
Yeah, of
wrong
course.
place.
Because, work takes up such a huge chunk of our lives. It's hard
Yeah.
to it's hard to put it aside or forget it. How did you deal with that situation?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that was a big mistake of mine.
So what did you
And
do? You left?
I actually, I left that school within a year. I actually left that school early. There was an issue of race. There was a student who was protesting the Pledge of Allegiance, and in the United States, you protest anything that has to do with the American flag, people, it gets bad. I mean,
Mhm.
it gets bad. And we had parents protesting outside of my classroom because I was allowing him to do it. So I was like, there's no law that says he has to do this. And it got so bad to eventually I sat down with leadership and I said, listen, you guys are going to pay me until the end of my contract, and I will not come back another day at work. And that's what they did, because they didn't want me to go to the papers. They knew that what happened was wrong. They knew that meetings that they took with me to ask me to convince him to stop his protest, they knew that that was wrong. And they knew that there were other things going on in the school that were not related, but that they did not want to come out.
Mhm.
You know, principals stealing money, like all sorts of issues that they didn't want to come out, that I found out after the fact, but they ended up paying me. I left about 2 months early before the school year ended, and they paid me all through the end of my contract. Um, but I left and I ended up in the best place that I'd ever been after that.
Fabulous. Um, so you stayed for a year,
Mhm.
though. That was a
Yeah,
hard year.
yeah. It was the hardest year of my career. It was uh, not only because I knew I was in the wrong place, but there were so many incidents that happened to show me that I was in the wrong place.
Just continually confirming.
Yeah.
How did you how did you just find a way to just sustain yourself for that year? That would have
Yeah.
been hard.
It was my family. I have 4 kids, and my wife, and it was just reminding myself like I'm doing it for them. Like, and I get to go home to them every day. And then it was also finding these little sweet moments in the process. I got to work with students, and even though I did not like my environment, I had some of the most incredible students that I got to work with. Some of which I'm still in contact with this like
Today.
today,
Hmm.
and they made the journey doable. They made it possible, like really and
Okay.
truly.
So I'm reading that there were pockets of happiness and joy throughout, and that you
Yeah,
clung to that to help you
yeah,
sustain. Okay. Um,
yep.
how have you built up your body of work? Talk to us a little bit about your body of work, what it
Oh
is,
yeah,
where does it sit? How are you shining a light on it?
yeah. I made a conscious decision about 2 years ago to start claiming my intellectual property,
Hmm.
even creating in some ways a backlog of the things that I've created, and finding ways to communicate those online, which is why I'm on LinkedIn. Like my primary reason for being on LinkedIn is so I can house my intellectual property
Hmm.
um, in a place where it's attached to my face and my name.
So that's LinkedIn, right?
Because
As in you're
Mhm.
housing it on LinkedIn. Okay. You
Yep, on
don't have,
LinkedIn,
you have a website?
yeah, I have a website. I have a personal website,
Okay.
yatesmike.com. I have a blog. I have a blog that no one sees, that I don't share. I literally just use it because everything that I post on LinkedIn, I publish it to that blog. Because if you post an article to a social media site like LinkedIn or Facebook, um, theoretically, LinkedIn owns that content. And if they wanted to, and they often do, if you see like people, if you post something that one of their editors likes, they will take it and put it in a news feed update. Like, like
Yeah.
when when the Chauvin trial in the United States, we had a police officer murdered somebody, and when the verdict came, I posted about the verdict, And they didn't ask me at all. They took my post and they put it in a news update about it. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, most people won't complain about that. But if you think about the intellectual property, somebody should have asked me, right? And so because of that, every article that I write, I don't do this for every post. Every article that I write on LinkedIn, every newsletter that I write, I also publish it to that blog, because if I want to put that in a book someday, there are cases, like there is a world one day that may be coming where if your book does well enough, LinkedIn can say, we need some of that money because that's from our platform.
Absolutely. That is a very good point. And that's what I talk to people about as well, is that a lot of people treat LinkedIn or any kind of social platform as their site, but
Right.
it's not yours. It doesn't belong to you. Your personal website
Right.
belongs to you. So you always have to have your personal site as your digital home, not the social media. Social media is the car that gets you to the home, right?
Exactly.
You don't own it. If they change the rules on you, and you know what you just mentioned, that sounds scary. You write a book and they've got a ton of content that you've been putting there for years, and they suddenly want a piece of that pie.
Right.
That's a horrible situation. And you know what did they do? You know, it's all your
Mm-hmm.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad to
And
hear
with,
that you've got the blog.
yeah, it's stashed on the internet on Blogger. I know somebody who prints out, like he physically prints out pages, so that like he'll type it on Google Docs, prints it out, and then he puts it online, so that it, you know, seals it in an envelope so he can make sure he's old school, but but you know, you got to take precautions.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so final question on the body of work is what tips can you share about beginning a process of building a body of work?
Yeah. I think being really clear about who you are and what you want to get out of this. When I sought to build my body of work in educational reinvention and reform, it was like I looked for opportunities to speak. I looked for opportunities to display my expertise. And I looked for opportunities to work with people. There's a blog that's doing really, really well now. And I reached out to them. I said, hey, I saw that you posted about wanting to build a learning platform. I can help you do that. And I didn't charge anything. I said, look, I'm just going to help you do that. I spoke for free for a full year before I started charging people, because I knew that like every time that I speak, yes, it sucks that it's for free. And at that point, I didn't even think about it that way. I was just like, somebody wants to hear from me, so I'm gonna go give them everything. There are some people that will tell you never speak for free, and they might be right. And a lot of those people are pulling in $15,000 per gig, but that wasn't the route I chose. I chose the route to create value and to build strong relationships with people. About 70% of my paid speaking gigs today are people who I spoke for free 2 years ago. And so when I built my body of work, I focused on the being in the very specific arenas that I wanted to talk to. I work in education, but I don't want to talk to everybody in education, because everybody in education is not willing to hear what I have to say. There's a big charter school network in the United States called KIP, and they invited me to speak at their 25th anniversary, and I said, no way, because I'm going to upset everybody in the room, because I don't believe in your model. Right? Like I would, even if they paid me $20,000, no way, I'm not going to do that. Because at the end of the day, I love that you use the term body of work. That's more important than that short-term gratification of changing up your message to say, look at me, I spoke for this big organization. No way. So you have to pick your niche, stick to that, and you got to do what it takes to create a body of work. If you don't already have immediate avenues for that, you got to do stuff for free.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's coming across for me in this call is that clarity that, first of all, the purpose, there's a singular vision. There's a very clear idea of what it is that you are working to achieve. There's a very clear idea of the problem that you're working to solve. And then there's a lot of clarity and purpose behind everything. So that makes it, I guess, easy to know what are the things that you will say yes to. It makes it very easy to also then know what are the things you'll say no to. And that, you know, when you're looking at it from the outside, it just, oh yeah, it all makes sense. But when you're in the thick of things, as you are, you know, you've gotten to this point, but I'm sure you didn't start out here. there was a whole process of kind of
Right.
getting to this point. So that's what I wanted to be able to highlight here. So just a couple of quick questions before we end. Share 2 habits that you consider essential to your ongoing success.
One is asking a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think asking the right questions, like a good question, is really important. And the other habit, I really, this one, people always laugh when I say this, but I really do think is posting between 1 and 4 times per day on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, those are the 2 I got.
Your 2. Okay. What has been, I know you said that you didn't really have much fear with the public speaking, but with any kind of fear, what has been instrumental in helping you overcome that fear?
My wife. My wife she is an angel from heaven.
Oh,
But it really is that she reminds me every day, like I mean verbally. I don't mean just like looking at my, like I mean like verbally. She reminds me of the mission that we signed up for together, right? She's like, look, you're doing this, I'm doing it with you. Like she reminds me of that. She reminds me of like what we're really building, which is like my career is important. Building my family is more important than that. And she helps me put things in perspective. So it's definitely her.
excellent. Um, and the last question, what are some guiding principles that have enabled you to play the long game?
Oh yes. It's the number one thing that I learned is that deferred gratification is the best gratification. And then the other thing I would say is serving people. I just think if we as a human race, if we can just get this, that human beings, the person next to you is so important, regardless of what they believe, regardless of where you disagree, that's a whole human being who's important. And if we can just get this whole like working together thing down, like the world will be a lot better place. So I really focus on serving other people. And really honestly, like expecting nothing in return, because I'm at a place where I'm fortunate where I'm good. Like I'm good in a lot of on a lot of fronts. But even when I wasn't, like even when I wasn't making enough money, I just knew if I just help people, when the day comes that I need help, like it'll be there. And so I just focus on helping as many people as I can, whether they are doing what I'm doing or not. Whether it's hard on the schedule. It's sometimes it's thankless, but
Mhm.
it's what I'm choosing to do. It's the bet that I'm making in life.
So there you have it, Mike Yates. Mike is reinventing education with the Reinvention Lab at Teach for America, and he's host of the Schoolish podcast. Thank you so much, Mike, for coming on this call. It's been wonderful to hear more about your journey and to discover the things that you're working on, to get more clarity on your direction. Where can people find you online?
Find me on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
Mike Yates. I take pride. I'm the number one Mike Yates on LinkedIn. Um, that doesn't matter anywhere else in the world, but that was one of my small goals when I started. But I'm also on Twitter at just Mike Yates, and you can go to Mike Yates, or sorry, yatesmike.com, which is my website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for your time today. It was amazing to have this chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you on LinkedIn and seeing all the wonderful things that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You asked such great questions. I love them.
Thank you.